Professor Victoria Vesna is a professor of design and art at UCLA and is the director of the Art Sci Institute at UCLA. And I apologize if I get any of this wrong, Victoria, but Victoria and I have known each other for quite a while now, since I think 2015 when Jim Jimjeski introduced us. And I was working on morphing surfaces at Lockheed and tried to get Victoria interested and maybe get some of her students involved in that. We never quite brought that to fruition, although we had some really nice brainstorming sessions, et cetera, that I really fondly remember still. But anyway, thank you, Victoria.
Cherished collaborator.
Yes.
Thank you so much for including me, and I was very happy to hear some of the comments about playing and the irrational, etc., because I could definitely fill in that gap.
Yes.
So I will share my screen and give you a little talk about the idea of Octopus brainstorming and how this project came about. So it's a little story here. So what you're seeing here is the Pacific Wheel in Santa Monica and the Octopus here. And it was 8-bit, which kind of inspired me to think about the 8 arms of the octopus. And to start the story properly, I consider the Ferris wheel, the World Fair in the 1800s, as kind of the symbol of the industrial age. And the people inside these this wheel are in the cogs. And it's playful and it's mechanics, and it really just started this whole boom. The end of this age is this picture, which of course is kind of iconic, of the Ferris wheel in Chernobyl, which had to be evacuated within 36 hours. All the people had to be evacuated because of a plume of radioactive dust that was, as we know to this day, incredibly destructive. And nothing as bad happens since, until the Fukushima, of course, in 2011. So the end of the industrial age is here, and this is just a tiny bit about the city, Pripyat, that actually was formed in the 70s, and that it was a boom, and it was it was a big status symbol to live there. A very short life span, a big warning to the entire world that, again, is a little forgotten. So with that in mind, I started thinking about the Ferris wheel as a place to do a commission that I got from Santa Monica. It's for an event that's called Glow, and it lasts 24 hours, well, actually less, from dusk to dawn. So I have to say I spent a year working on this idea, because it became, of course, much more complicated than I ever thought. How do you engage the public and get this through their head? And the octopus became a perfect thing to look at. So again, going back in history a little bit, a lot of negative kind of ideas around the octopus were happening, especially around wars and the idea of taking over and this kind of scary alien creatures. So you can see these different countries showing different types of the octopus taking over, whether it's capitalism or it's politics, all this negative stuff. And it's only recently, relatively recently, that we started actually, this is another horrible picture about the kind of Judaism, anti-Semitic picture. And it continues. If you do a search on this, it's pretty amazing. So all of this brought me to this idea that the octopus would be taking over the industrial wheel. In other words, the biological mandala with eightfold way would be taking over the industrial kind of world and the age of biotech coming in. So very briefly, what I envisioned is reaching out to friends around the world who live in different places, and they would actually engage and occupy the wheel with the octopus. And these crowns were created that I'll show in a second. But we did manage to get not only the Pacific wheel, but wheel in Seattle and New York and Australia working in tandem together and generating a lot of talk and energy in these worlds. So this one was in Marseille, and this one was an announcement for the Octopus Mandala in Seattle. And here we are on the beach with a few of my artist friends actually occupying the wheel at Coney Island in New York. This was in Sydney. And all of this was happening remotely. So again, this whole idea of how to collaborate remotely was, but in physical space as well, was very much about this, and how to engage the public about this idea that the octopus is actually taking over. And so just to remind everybody, I'm sure a lot of you know, but octopuses have 3 hearts because they pump their blood to the gills and larger heads to the rest of the body. They have 9 brains. The central brain has these 8 arms that actually act independently. And they actually have blue blood, which is pretty amazing. So they can really work in very, very low oxygen areas. And all of this just got me very kind of excited about continuing to work with the octopus. And spending a year for a 1-day project or exhibition left me with a lot of octopus crowns, and I kept thinking about it. This image to this day just blows my mind, because what you're seeing is the similarity between the octopus and the human eye, and yet on an evolutionary scale, they're just completely different. So this idea of alien and communicating with the alien that's with us, that's among us, is really what I started getting very interested in. How do you create empathy with creatures that we share the earth with, and understand what's going on, and really co-work with these abstract creatures? So yes, we can eat them, but we can also work with them. And so, funnily enough, this thing, when I was preparing this talk, I found this beautiful announcement for assistant professor in Iowa who's actually looking, and she got a DARPA Young Innovator Award to develop soft robotics and looking at the tentacles. So this really made me so happy to see this young woman who actually is going into the octopus mandala. Here's an image of how this piece then further developed, and I'll explain it a little more here. Because what also started concerning me in parallel to looking at underwater noise, at underwater creatures, is also what we're experiencing with these waves that we're bombarded with right now, as you said, as we all sit around all the different devices, in addition to everything else. And just to think about how all of this is moving as I'm talking to you, and in a way, it truly is a miracle. At the same time, we don't really know how all of this is affecting our mental states, the noise. And so the noise became a really interesting thing for me to look at and research. And I asked a question, which is what artists do in science labs, ask these weird questions. How does the weather pattern actually influence our brain waves? In other words, when there's weather patterns in different parts of the world, does that influence my brain waves? And this question I posed to Mark Cohen, who was a neuroscientist here at UCLA, he recently retired, who actually pulled together a group of us to talk about his idea of developing a center for visualization. That never happened, but our conversations continued. And he was very open to this question, actually. He thought there was something to it. And I was looking at how to connect maps to our brain waves and weather patterns, and how the whole idea of climate change is also a change in our minds and actually mental illness as well. Also, I started talking to Jim's friend and collaborator, Carlo Ventura, who was working with sound waves and still is, and that's pretty amazing work, actually. And he introduced me to the work of Michael Graves, who also passed away recently, but was working with heartbeats and creating music that actually would balance the heartbeat of people who suffer from arrhythmia. And this I found fascinating too. And so we started experimenting and getting some lectures from Dr. Cohen and trying out different off-the-shelf devices. And eventually he got sucked into it and decided to tolerate these ideas and kept asking me why Octopus, and I kept explaining why, and kind of went with it. Why? Because when would he ever have the opportunity of testing out some of these ideas in public with other people in an area that's got many, many people? So for instance, we showed this at the LA Art Fair with thousands of people, and yet we managed to have data from the two participants. So we basically, what you have is 8-channel audio, and each one has a tone that's connected to 8 different colors. And when two people are non-verbally communicating, if they're out of rhythm, which a lot of times they are, they're actually creating music that's like jazz. If they come into rhythm, there's a kind of nice synergy happening in both in color and in sound. And if they're in rhythm, and so going in and out, they're actually in real time creating music, but also showing where people can synchronize and where not. So I'll give you a short 1-minute clip to give you an idea, but I'm gonna actually stop sharing and make sure I turn my sound. Oh, it's not letting me show the video, is that right?
It shouldn't be that way. It should be okay.
I don't see optimized for video clip, but let's give it a shot. Do you see it okay?
Yeah, we see it.
And you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. So what you see here is these colors are changing depending on when they're in and out of sync. But also in the back, this is a black and white video of an octopus that is being changed as well. So the entire room is actually influenced by their communication that's nonverbal. And of course, they're embodying this alien creature. So that takes me deeper into noise pollution and thinking about what's going on and how these creatures are bombarded by all these different sources, you know, from sonar to hydrophones to looking for pipes laying down, all kinds of things going on, nonstop, this incredible noise. And we know very well how this influences communication between whales and dolphins. But I was actually curious also what happens to octopuses or planktons or these other creatures that are not necessarily in the lens of, or can be even researched in a way that's usually done. So when I was invited by the Vienna Angewandte Visualization Lab to do something with planktons that they were visualizing, I decided to blow them up as huge as whales and to have people create the noise by their presence. And the noise would be actual noise coming from the recording from the Oceanographic Society. But the way we did it is with 24 channels. It was really immersive noise. And we could not have people in there for more than 5 minutes when they would create noise because it's so intense. So on the way out, we would say, this happens 24 hours a day underwater. So the idea here is that you're balancing yourself. And if you are in complete balance, then you actually bring one of the plankton species, we did 7, to communicate and commune with, and really marvel at the amazing complexity of these micro creatures that actually produce 80% of our air, the oxygen we breathe. So a lot of this project was actually created in sense of urgency, and it's continuing to happen. I'll show you a little video of that. When a person manages to center themselves, you actually hear the sound of the whale. So the idea is to go from the bottom of the food chain to the top and really show how it's affecting all of us. But ultimately, showing to the audience and relating the fact that 80% of our air is produced by these amazing creatures, and asking that question, does noise pollution affect plankton? Actually, at the beginning of my project, I couldn't find any scientists that addressed this. Now there's more, and that's really hopeful actually, because it is the oxygen we breathe. So let's continue. Sorry. So just briefly to show the technology behind it. This is the actual plankton species. This is following the, apologies for that. Sorry about that. I don't even know where it is. Okay, we'll ignore it. Sorry about that. These are 3D scans of, oh yeah. These are 3D scans of the planktons. So here's an example of paramecium I'll briefly show. So if you just did this, you wouldn't really engage the audience in a way. But what the biologists did in Vienna is they actually scanned these creatures, 3D scanned. And then you saw the one in the project. So this is the 3D scan that then was visualized and then animated based on how the movement of the plankton work. Actually, one other thing I'd like to show briefly is this. Also discovering microplastics, that plankton eat microplastics. And so again, this is really important for us to think about when we're talking about climate change and pollution and plastics in particular, which by the way, are much worse now with the pandemic. Planktons eat them. And so that tells you a lot, ... I don't have to go further than that. That means we're eating plastic and we don't really know where all of that is going. All right, so we go from the depths of the ocean to the cosmos, and a brief introduction to the idea of dust, although we already addressed a little bit the radioactive dust that was in Chernobyl. So just like I was pretty adamant, and still am, to tell people that air is produced by these amazing micro creatures and they're dying. So too, I wanted to have people think about the 70 to 100 tons of this extraterrestrial material that falls on the Earth every day and dissipates, falls on Earth, on roofs in different places. Scientists have been looking for them. I found this amazing, and I thought it was really important, especially during the pandemic, to talk about the fact that dust knows no borders, and a lot of the bacteria, a lot of the viruses even, are moved around airborne as dust, as we know now. So here's Sam and Jim's lab looking at some dust that I found on the roof of CNSI. And here's some dust on keyboards. So basically, this whole idea of microdust has been really advanced by a jazz musician in Norway who asked the question again, well, if scientists are going to Antarctica to look for dust, they're looking for a place that's not really touched. How about the roof? I can find some there. And sure enough, he did a lot. Thousands and thousands of specimens that are unidentified, right? Alien bits, but also amazing amount of dust pollution. So I've been told for years that I'm allergic to dust. And now I'm asking, what do you mean? Which dust of the 5 billion particles am I allergic to? And this is the essential problem of complexity in relation to reductionist science, right? So you're going to give me what for dust? An antihistamine? And how do I know which dust it is? And sure enough, looking around and doing some research, this was at CERTA, at the Polytechnique in Paris, where they were researching dust. And I was in residence for a little bit, learning a little bit more about it. And specifically, they were looking at Notre Dame and the dust that was coming from the fire there from the church. And then here's scientists at the roof of the Vienna Natural History Museum, where I was commissioned to do a piece. And it's a very simple process where you're collecting dust with magnets, because most of the particles that come from space would be magnets. And upstairs in the museum, we were looking for what we found, and we found a bunch of stuff. So Saharan dust in Vienna, a hair of some animal, plastic, lichen, and it looked absolutely clean, pristine, and beautiful. Here we even found a little bit of red something. What is it? It's a bit of plastic that we inhale. And so here's the idea that I came up with for the museum. I asked them if they would give me one meteorite from each continent. And those meteorites would fall on each continent and kind of spread dust. And it would be different types of dust depending on where it would fall. So we'll take one as an example, which would be Africa. And so here, I'll just pause it for a second. We picked the meteorite that fell in Morocco. And then we found some micrometeorites and desert dust, which is what we found on the roof. So there's no sound here, I'll just explain it. So each location on each continent would be shown, and then these are the different meteorites, different particles that fall, and also showing how this spreads. So from Africa, it spreads, and a lot of it is actually really good because it fertilizes Amazon forests. There's a whole system there, and there's some, I mean, a whole another 5 hours to describe all this, but just to give you an idea. So this is a nice imagery that shows you how this travels. But you can put your head in that visualization for many things, including the Chernobyl dust, including the Fukushima, etc. So to create ways for people to start thinking as planetary citizens is really the key. So as you can see from this date here, this opened on March 11th, 2020. And the day after the opening, where I did 3D renderings and visualizations, and people came in and the museum closed. And so here's what we have. You hear me walking on this empty museum. It was quite spooky. And it's still closed due to dust and bacteria and viruses. It's called Alien Stardust, and here you see the dust that was collected on the roof, so people could watch it, look at it themselves. Here's the bit of an explanation of the different specimens, and then 3D printed micrometeorites kind of blown up, and then the visualization, which I will show you. So what happens then? Again, an urgent message about dust and what's going on and how it's transporting everything around the planet, and that you can create all the lockdowns you want. It's not going to work until we work together. I decided to start creating a number of online events, particularly kind of a collective meditation with the visualizations. And this was also really an interesting experiment because we had to perform in real time from remote locations. So this is Paul Geluso, who I've been working with for many years. He's a sound engineer that works specifically for immersive environments at NYU. And on the right side is the space in the Integratron where we did the work. And this is a shot that I just wanted to give you a sense. So Paul is in New York, Zeynep is in Turkey, Rihanna is in New York, John is in San Francisco, Ellie, Deborah, and Anna was in Poland. And my students were at Joshua Tree actually working with me. So let's take a look a little bit at what we were doing. We're talking about visualizations of a meteorite that falls and then bursts into all these different particles. But the sound actually is critical. And so what we did is we tapped into the COVID data from Washington University, and we sonified it. So this was one layer of sound. And this is in different parts of the world. So we had this data in real time related to that particular day with the data going on. It must be going absolutely nuts now. And it creates a kind of a layer of anxiety in a way. And then we had this low-level drone sound that Paul composed, which is based on the kind of a drone solfeggio harmonies. So it's supposed to neutralize the nervousness of the COVID data. And then we had Rihanna and Anna's human voice. And then data from NASA and ESA, and also from the roof of the museum. So this idea of listening to different parts of the world became and is critical to me right now. I'm actually working on a project called Vibrations Matter that's been in development for years, but now I feel it's more important than ever. So for instance, the Earth's magnetic field vibrates like a drum, so we have that drum sound all the time, but we can also now listen to the instruments on Mars, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. And so listening is the key now. So what I'm developing now is using AR and binaural sound. If you have a print, you don't have to necessarily be in front of your computer, but if you have a print, you can put your headphones on, either your phone or whatever mechanism you have, tablet, and watch and listen. And the binaural listening is particularly interesting because it kind of tricks your brain to really be fully immersive. And engaging the audiences from different parts of the world is also really important to me. So here's a sample for you. So that gives you a little taste. And also what we're doing is we got a grant from the Getty to do a project in 2024. And I decided to really focus on artists who work, sound artists in particular, with sound and climate change. And it's amazing the kind of work that's out there. It's almost overwhelming to figure out how to filter that and how to give everybody a voice, and why those voices are not heard more. Because to engage people of all walks of life and an experience that's immersive is what can change consciousness in much faster way than a lot of the bombardments that are happening now. So with that, I'd like to mention the SciArt that we do once a year, because we did have people mention here and there today about the youth and thinking about the impossible. We've been having this summer program since 2005 now, and it's pretty incredible to see what the students come up with and how fast they respond in 2 weeks of being given information without dumbing it down, and really seeing what open minds can do. And it's just really, really fascinating. And I would also like to say, in relation to STEM, that I pretty much changed the meaning of it. So yes, we add arts, but I really felt like that was almost an afterthought. So there was STEM, and then, oh yeah, we should include arts because they can help us visualize. I changed it to science, technology, ecology, arts, and mindfulness. And this was after a lot of pedagogical thinking, and also thinking of myself in relation to science and technology. Engineering and math are in science and technology, so we don't really need to separate it, and we actually shouldn't. The arts are still in the middle, but I think what's most important now is to listen to each other, to listen to other cultures, other creatures, to the other, and to understand that all this innovation in space that's happening now is not by coincidence. It's because we are really propelling ourselves in the age as planetary citizens, and we have to share that with everybody else. All right, thank you.
Lovely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, that was great.
Wow.
Thank
I
you.
really found that moving somehow in some mysterious way. I don't know. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Next time, maybe you can put on your headphones and really get.
Right, with the binaural effect and the whole 9 yards,
It's
right?
beautiful and it's disturbing, and all of these issues are just so key. I love the way that you're bringing them to the fore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's playful, but it also pulls you in to find out more and to be more aware. But in every work, I really try to show how important it is to stay centered in yourself when you're experiencing all this chaos. And now I think it's more important than ever, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. So with the Octopus work, how long would it take people to get into coherence? And were some, pairs much faster, or some pairs not even able to do that, or?
Both. So people who meditate would do it so quickly. if there's 2 people who meditate, and this is absolute fact, it would be within minutes. They just go and almost get boring, because they could also hold it. And so you would just get this constant hum, and everybody would go, okay. And then there's people just couldn't, and would even get frustrated, and then the sound was getting more and more hectic and weird because they weren't able to achieve what they wanted. So it actually is beautiful to watch, because you're seeing this interrelationship between two people. And if you take a meditator and a non-meditator, it's also interesting too how it can slowly be gently moved to a place of coherence. But there's no rules. What was actually fascinating to Mark is that, well, first of all, you could never do this kind of research in a regular neuroscience lab. And I kept saying, if you put me in a white box and measure my brain, that's so different from me being in a crowd of people thinking about the same things. And how often am I in a completely isolated state? Well, that's not true anymore, but now we're all there. I take that back.
That's why we need that little MRI now. The MRI beanie.
Hold on, Alice. I can't hear you. Wait a minute. I gotta shut this down. Hold on.
Okay. That's okay. I won't take it personally.
We go back to that cue, yeah. Have you ever thought about doing the same thing with, say, the gut brain or the heart brain?
Very much so. Actually, I'm teaching today, and it's interesting that you brought that up because we're going to talk about the microbiome. And all the students are making their own kombucha and then thinking about how to work with the leather, and just how to create other types of plastics, but in relation to the mind gut, the gut feeling that you were also mentioning. Absolutely. I have another whole big project with food, as you may know, with Hug Zodiac and genetics, etc. So food is critical, absolutely. And, planktons are at the base of that, and air and pollution. And, to separate COVID and the pandemic from the climate change, I think is just crazy. I have no way to prove that, but I just think it's so hand in hand together. And we're just making it worse by the way we're approaching it. Yes, amazing forward leaps with the RNA technology, absolutely amazing. But the political decisions and the way different countries act in different states and not having some kind of cohesive worldwide approach, I think is what's going to be a terrible lesson for us if we keep doing this. Because that's the whole idea of the plankton and the dust, that it's all so connected, and it's us. It is the planetary microbiome that we're part of, that's our microbiome. So the complexity is such that it cannot be addressed in the current methodologies of science. You can take a dolphin or a whale and tag him and follow. You can't do that with thousands of species of plankton.
Right.
So they're micro creatures. So how do we deal with complexity, I think, is the core issue that you're addressing. And it's very, very interesting to me, because I think it has to come from many, many different angles and disciplines and cultures and creatures. We have to literally talk to other creatures too. Right. And maybe outer space people too.
Right.
I like, once again, though, that idea of people who do focus on how will we talk to aliens from outer space, when once again we point out we're still not actually talking even to dogs who are endlessly patient with us as they try to communicate. So trying to understand and communicate with the other species that are right around us right now is what we can do right now. And I love what you say about how listening has become actually the most important thing right now. And perhaps the hardest to do when
With-
complexity increases and noise is
And the
overwhelming.
noise everywhere around us.
Nice.
So the problem of information density, again, we need some help. We need a little bit of help. Just like the filters that we already have are not enough. Too much and not enough.
The Arrival movie used octopus-like creatures as the aliens to speak with, and they communicated rather than in our horrid 800 baud serial sequential language. They communicated in parallel logograms.
Oh, that's interesting.
How nice to hear your voice,
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, nice to hear your voice, Robert.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that comment. I love it. Yeah, it's interesting that the octopus came into human consciousness with the pandemic, with the movie. So I've had a lot of people say, oh, the octopus. Yeah, the octopus and the tiger, these are the two creatures that have really emerged in the pandemic trying to send us a message.
Yeah, I'm
We have
amazed.
to go. We have to go from calamari to large tanks in our homes with pets, octopus pets.
Right, definitely. They're so intelligent. I mean, they can figure out puzzles and locks and
I don't eat that.
yeah, so we do not eat octopus anymore.
I don't at all.
So I just saw a thing about some scientists taught goldfish how to steer their tank around on the ground. They put their tank on wheels and they got a treat if they swam in a certain direction, the tank would follow the direction they swam and it would drive around.
So we could swim around together driving our tank.
Right. And they'd learn how to go around obstacles, and then these were goldfish. So
They drove it on the street.
yeah, and so they took them out on the street to let the fish drive around their fish tank on the street.
You have to share that with us.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
great.
We will do that.
That's kind of amusing.
Yeah.
I heard of a project way back of somebody who tried to reverse engineer goldfish because they're completely engineered that don't exist in the wild. So this would actually kind of counter that. We continue developing them.
Right. They're getting more and more sophisticated, right?
Right, that's a good point. I like it.
I like it. Any other comments for Victoria or?
I saw some nice comments in the chat. Thank you, Jeannie and Florian. Marcus, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I've always heard that the person, the person talking is always the one having the most fun. Someone told me once. So I like this comment about, listen 1/3 of the time and talk 2/3. And I don't know. Here I am, and then.
That's a big percentage to be talking though.
That's a big percentage.
Listen 1/3 and talk 2/3.
Yeah, or I think it was the opposite, but I don't know. Yeah, I was just reading the chat. I forget what I said. Ignore
He
me.
cut us down from 13% to 10% play during David Lewis's talk.
Right.
And now we're talking 2/3 of the time.
I don't know.
Great.
It sure was enjoyable hearing all of these different thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
I hope to see you guys again after lunch.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody,
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So, after lunch, Jim is going to talk about the emergent emergency and emergent behavior and who knows what exactly. So very exciting. That's at 3:00 Eastern. We'll come back. And I'm just going to leave I'll stop recording, but I'm going to leave the Zoom on if people want to chat or whatever they want to do. And we're going to have some lunch now. And then thank you very much, Victoria. So much appreciated. Thank you.
bye.
Bye.